Hello, and welcome to episode 23 of Destroy Before Listening, which is a conversation between myself, Pete Byrne, and Lee Knights. Having been involved as a drummer in many Sheffield area bands over the past 25 years, he has a versatile skill set ranging from death and black metal to hardcore, grind, doom, jazz, and beyond. Probably most notable for the frenetic grind of the Thekevorkiansolution in the early 2000s, or the apocalyptic hardcore of Koreisch, or controversial straight-edge metal band Slavearc in the later 90s. Moving past these bands, he became part of the Frequency 13 record scene with more experimental and psychedelic bands like The Unholy Warlock, Drone of Ica, and Icebound Majesty. Most recently, he has played in doom metal band Blind Monarch and Out Inc., which is his latest more experimental prog jazz project. Please follow on Instagram at Destroy Before Listening. Thanks. Right then, okay. Earliest exposure to music and, wanting to play an instrument. That would be the thing. And how old were you? How old would that would be?
Well, I think it's got to have started. Well, there's a couple of things I think. So one is listening to records while my mum were ironing. That's the only time she listened to records is when she were ironing. We only had a few, but the one I can remember most is we're a Frankie Valli double album, but recorded in the 70s. So they were like a groove, like a funk band almost, as his backing band. And yeah, just hearing that and it being different to what other stuff were around. So I suppose at that time you got Duran Duran and Madonna and stuff like that, which I did really like. But then I started hearing this funkier stuff. And I think that were a big thing. But the other big thing was seeing bands at working men's clubs. That were my kind of every Friday night we'd go and watch a band, and it's at a time when it were a full band. It weren't like a backing track and a singer, but full bands doing rock songs, and just sitting and having me pop and crisps and watching a drummer play these songs. So then, I discovered, at school there were a battered drum kit that no one used in a music room, and I used to sneak in at dinner times, and there were no drumsticks, so I'd to use pencils. So started doing that, and then got a bit of an audience. There'd probably be 10 kids watching me play drums, and then played in school play, and then probably left it for a bit, went to college, and then picked it back up when I got introduced to a guy called Simon, who I did probably 4 or 5 bands with. His mum's introduced us because his mum and my mum worked together, and she said, "Oh, our Simon's into that heavy metal stuff." So we hooked up and started doing bands from that. Really basic stuff, but that were the first.
So was it metal being the first serious sort of genre music you just really felt an affinity to then? And would you say you're more of a metal drummer, really?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, rock and metal. Another one I remember me uncle playing Thin Lizzy live and Dangerous. It just absolutely blew me away again because, I'd been around pop music and I do love 80s pop music, but it was something else about it. It was just another thing. It were, I don't know, more earthy. I mean, obviously I didn't think that then, but it was just something about it that I could almost, I could call mine. That everyone didn't like it. At school, be like, oh, have you heard Madonna's new thing or this thing? But like, you couldn't say to someone at school, have you heard Thin Lizzy's Live and Dangerous? No one were into that. So as it went on, getting into Metallica and Slayer and stuff, I was only a kid at school listening to that, and no one understood. And you can't say, have you heard South of Heaven? Third song on
Yeah.
That's Amazing. No one knew that. No one, they'd got no idea. So,
Yeah.
so I think it was my thing. And it took a long time to find other people for who it were their thing as well. Because through college, it was a time when like Oasis were breaking and stuff like that, and everyone went into that stuff. And again, there were no one at college that were into metal either.
Well, I know something with regard to that is what's the role of the guy there, Dave Formula, who was in the group's magazine and Visage as well, wasn't he? Jerry told us about that.
Oh,
Yeah.
I thought that was quite odd that you bring in Dave.
Yeah. Thought I'd sneak that one in. So.
Yeah, that were a bit later. So I went to do a music tech course, and we've got this really cool guy who were teaching us music history, teaches about kind of, from slave trade into blues and that call and response stuff, and then into jazz and all sorts. And I just got chatting with him one day because I took some music in that I thought were mind blowing, which were what they call Mr. Bungle's second album. And right. I played him that, and we got chatting, and he actually introduced me to Captain Beefheart as well, because they did a cover magazine. And he said, I used to play in a band, and obviously knowing Fade to Grey growing up as a single, he's like, oh yeah, I played on that, and I played in magazine. I'm like, you're joking, aren't you? But yeah, really, really cool guy. And I saw him probably 10 years ago play. He don't know whether he still does. He was playing in a funk band. I didn't think he'd recognise me, but he recognised me. We had a good chat. So, yeah, really cool guy. Dave Formula, a.k.a. Dave Tomlinson.
Yeah. When I was at college, like Paul Harvey from Penetration and Rob were my tutors.
Right.
So it was like a punk rock high school sort of scenario. And that. It was like, that was really cool as well. I didn't really know much. I don't think I'd ever heard much of the band, but they were just like cool guys,
Yeah.
But what was the first band that you played in, or like when did you decide that like a band was the idea you're going to pursue as a drummer, like getting together with other people?
Yeah, I think,
original.
Well, I'd got my first kit, and I'd got it in my mum and dad's garage, and I used to jam with a kid who he actually, I think one of the first metal things I ever heard, he said, I've got this tape, you need to listen to this tape. And it were Iron Maiden's first album. So with the first song on the first album, it absolutely blew me away. I'm like, what even is this? This is amazing. And so I did stuff with him, and that never really took off. But then after college, I hooked up with Simon again, and we started a band, and we played a couple of gigs with that band, but it were really basic, like almost aping the music that were around. So you've got, what had you got? You've got like Chaos AD, Sepultura, Biohazard second album. So it were around that kind of stuff. So a bit kind of groove metal orientated before new metal, but it got me playing. And I know Simon were way more into death metal, as I were just kind of getting into that stuff as well. So that was the first band, and we were called Just Another Victim.
How's the pain?
I think it was, yeah. It weren't my choice. Yeah, I think
How's the pain? Biohazard?
Yeah. All that stuff, yeah. So, yeah, and so that was first band, and then we were doing another band for a bit, and did a 3-track demo, and then Simon left to join this hardcore band called Slavearc. They did a demo and an EP, and their drummer left, and then they asked me to come in on drums, because I'd started playing double kick and I'd started playing blast beats, and they wanted to move away from that tough guy hardcore thing into more death metal, or I suppose deathcore, but so bringing in more influences like Cannibal Corpse and Deicide and stuff like that.
Right, Slavearc. This is what have I got down here? Like vegan, hardline, drug-free, straight edge, pro-life, anti-vivisection. Like every kind of cause going.
Yeah,
Just I don't know how we just like. Well, I don't know. I'm just a drummer, and there's all this like ideology going on that I'm not really identifying with.
Yeah, it were mostly that. I think I fell into some of it, but I were never on the front line of it, let's say. So I just turned up and played drums. I did go vegan, but I think maybe a few of them in band had more experience with that ideology and had been around that kind of straight edge hardcore scene for longer. Yeah, I just wanted to play death metal drums, really. And, the band, it did get into some shit for their viewpoints and stuff like that. But yeah, I were never really part of that, shouting about it, because I mean, I don't know how they even ended up getting banned, as in communication wise. I mean, were they emailing people and stuff like that? Because I don't know, I've no idea, or abusing people at gigs. But I mean, I never saw that. Like I say, I just turned up and played drums.
I just remember the name, I suppose, from like maybe seeing it at like 1 in 12 fest type things. And because I guess like 97, 98, 99 is like peak sort of Earth crisis time, isn't it? And like everyone's kind of beat down and moshing and like, wearing bandanas and, baggy jeans and, being metal.
Yeah. So I would slap bang in the middle of all that, but we did end up moving away from that, and whether it's because they got banned from playing places or that we were just trying to move away from that hardcore scene, but we did play a couple of death metal festivals and purely death metal gigs, because we were turning up at these places and no promoters knew an ideological background to all that. So we were just turning up and playing death metal, and nothing was ever said at those gigs. There were no politics involved that I can remember. I think, it just seemed we were trying to move away from that.
Is there anything recordings-wise that you want to speak about with Slavearc, or because it's only demos, really, is it?
No. There were one demo on tape and then 2 EPs. The second of which I played on. They were released on the Singers label, which was Screams of Salvation, and we recorded it at Andy Sneap's place with Dave Chang. Still to this day, when I listen to it, really chuffed with sound, because it's got that thick death metal sound to it. But I think with 5 tracks, for all its ideological wonkiness, I think it's a good recording. Yeah, I'm proud because it was my first proper and first death metal recording. Because up until then, I'd done a few demos which were kind of maybe groove metal, even though I hate that term, groove metal, or commercial metal.
So, like, what would you say is different about like a death metal recording, or like you say, or a proper metal studio setup, or how the approach or whatever?
I think what it is for me at time, hearing records by like, Cannibal Corpse and Deicide, it was the thickness of the sound and the musicianship. So at that time, I wanted to be better, and the recording what we did at Andy Sneap's place, you could hear everything, and I was big into like Morris sound stuff, Death and Morbid Angel, and you could hear everything, and that's what I wanted. And I think that was the difference in recording, is that you got someone who knew how to record metal. Whereas these demos that we were doing, we were at local studios who were recording bands that sounded like Oasis and stuff like that, So they had no idea how to treat a kick drum or, scoop guitar EQs to get a different sound. So yeah, I think that was the difference for me is almost like a step up in recording quality and clarity in drums as well.
What was the kind of like the changeover from dropping out of, doing Slavearc to doing something, like realizing there was a different type of thing you wanted to go after?
Well, that kind of carried on into Koreisch, where 3 of the 4 members of Slavearc then formed Koreisch, and the hardline vegan thing almost didn't matter anymore because we were so nihilistic about everything, yet not understanding. What would I say? It weren't amateurish. It were almost like, maybe amateur philosophy, and a very one-dimensional worldview that everything were just ending, and no hope and stuff like that. So we got together and started playing music that were more open to other influences and bringing on a lot more like noise and industrial elements, and which I really like in a sense that Sheffield, it kind of reflected Sheffield as a sound. Forget the nihilism element to it, but the only record we did do it with Koreisch reflected a sound of Sheffield, I think, going back to Cabaret Voltaire and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Although we never set out to do that. It just kind of happened. We did that record, and when we recorded with a producer who had got absolutely no idea how to tame our sound. And it were almost one of them where he's got a mixing desk and a bloody broomstick and just pushed everything up to full, everything on full. And then we had to remix it all and then push it up again. And yeah, that were quite a hard record to make because, and the thing is with the producer as well, he used to get guys coming round to the studio, like really intense guys. And he'd disappear with these guys for 10 minutes. But he'd be saying, guys, like, really struggling to get a sound on this. I'm really struggling, I need to take a break. And this massive guy would show up, disappear, and he'd come back, his eyes as wide as saucers, be like, yeah, man, I know what we're doing now. Let's start again. And obviously we didn't realize they were like off his tits on coke. But
I was just going to say cocaine or something.
Yeah.
It's like it's the high end. It just makes you kind of like blast everything, doesn't it? Like you just put everything in the sort of like upper mids, trebly and that, don't you? And then just forget about the bass.
Yeah. And the thing is, because we were all, drug-free still at that time, not into anything like that, we'd no idea that he were off his head. We just thought he's really excited about this recording. We got that done, and I think we only played 4 gigs with that band. One were with Iron Monkey, which were a really cool gig. And, that ended up imploding, but that album does still get... words written about it now. Not much, but there's still stuff floating around in it.
I mean, anyone who's into that kind of that end of things is going to find something in it because it's like you say, it mixes the noisier industrial elements in with your death metal or black metal, grind, doom, and I'd also thought when I heard it recently, because I don't think I'd ever really heard any. It made me think of like it would have just fell in pretty nicely with what a band in America were doing at the same time, which would be Catharsis,
right?
And that crime think stuff, because their influences would be, I guess, the Cleveland, the Holy Terror kind of sound, that like integrity kind of idea.
Yeah. I mean, I think
I don't know if I'm off there or not.
No. I think, well, what we were doing at the time, I mean, I were really heavily into stuff that Relapse Records were releasing at that time. So you'd got Nile and Today's the Day. And there's a lot of inspiration, drumming-wise at least, on that album from that. But we were also, as a band, making probably monthly trips to Manchester because there were a shop in Affleck's Palace that were selling power violence 7 inches, and we were making trips and buying that and listening to that stuff around time where you've got bands like Asshole Parade and but stuff like Noothgrush and Floor, and it seemed like they were all part of this thing, but they were all really different in what they were doing, and I think we all fell quite heavily into that, even though it might not have influenced that music. It definitely influenced what came after Koreisch. But we were all listening to that. But at the same time, it's when I first started hearing stuff like Public Image and, the darker end of punk or post-punk or whatever, and some noise stuff, first hearing, Masonna and stuff like that around that time. And it were influenced with, VHS stuff where all the samples on that album is just me with a tape recorder recording from VHS badly. So stuff like Tetsuo and Bad Lieutenant and stuff like that. It were all around that really dark, and Planet of the Apes as well. It's really
you need some Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer as well, don't you? Some
I think there is
horrible hits the vibe.
Yeah. So it's all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, kind of moved away from stuff like that really now, because I think, I wouldn't say it's not a juvenile thing, but it were almost the excitement of that, but not knowing about real horror. And I don't mean fictional horror, I mean in the world horror.
Yeah.
We were quite close to that in a sense, but, we were still on. We had a lot of friends, in Animal Liberation Front, and people were quite extreme, but weren't into metal. So, we knew there were like horrible things happening. Yeah. So, that were Koreisch, really.
Yeah. So after that, you sold your drums and bought some keyboards. Is that what happened? Yeah.
Yeah.
Bit of a move.
I don't know why that happened, really. I think one of again, there were three of us moved on to the next thing, what we did. And I sold all my drums and bought a couple of crappy keyboards. And we started doing this trip-hop band. But through that, I ended up meeting at least two of the people that I'm involved with music-wise now. And we recorded a demo and did a couple of live gigs with that trip-hop stuff. But getting introduced to, hip-hop MCs, and it became a bit of a collective, which were kind of under the influence of a certain character in the scene, let's say. But once that character moved away from the scene, all the people involved in that stuck together, and we all did a lot of stuff after that. But moving from drums to beats and not knowing how to play that well, keyboard-wise, it were all a bit of a rough mishmatch of stuff. But it kind of worked for a bit. It was nice to do, I guess.
Taking the kind of that aspect and then the noise and all the influences, and then mixing it again, or mixing things up again into the Thekevorkiansolution, which is first half of the 2000s, isn't it?
Yeah. So that way we me and Simon again, we'd basically jettisoned everything from that kind of old way of thinking, the kind of ideology and stuff like that. And I will say that, Simon, like me, were never down with that ideology stuff. He wanted to play guitar in a death metal band. So we carried on, and I think there might have been a few like bands we were trying to do at time that never really took off. And then one day we got talking about, we should do a band what's just takes the really crazy elements of what we've done before and just that. And as we went on, we started mixing in electronics to it. But, I think that we're, again, massively inspired by power violence stuff and stuff like Discordance Axis and Human Remains and Ripping Corpse and stuff like that. So we just set out to do it, just me and Simon. So it were always just me and him writing songs, and then we got another guitarist in for a bit, which didn't end up lasting, and a singer. And, for a couple of years, we were just doing gigs as a three-piece. So guitar, drums, and vocals. But I think we realised that just those things alone made it sound quite sparse. So we had to fill it with all this, just as being as crazy as we could be with these song structures and blast beats and switching genres like halfway through a song and stuff like that. We recorded both albums with a techno producer who I'd met. Again, someone who not got experience in recording metal. So in a way, that's why they sound like they do. But also the electronic elements, he kind of helped with a lot of those on first album. And was showing me stuff that I didn't know, like sending something back into desk to feedback, and then using your EQs to almost play notes on feedback, which is included in that first album. So we learned a lot from that, and played some gigs, and then at that time we were still around a bit of a collective. There were a house what we all used to go to, and there probably were about 10 people in this collective, and we never called it a collective, but there'd be one guy who were into XTC and Kate Bush, and another guy who were listening to stuff like Cannibal Ox and LP, and then another guy who were into Warp Records stuff. But one of the guys played keyboards, and he used to work at Warp Records, and so we kind of drafted him into band to play synth live and on second album. And we ended up doing a couple of tours with that and getting a bit of coverage and releasing the second album.
The tours, is this the groups Oxes and Oxbow
They
you do tours with?
No, we just did gigs with, I think we...
Oh, gigs.
Did we do... yeah, we did one with Oxbow and one with Oxes, I think. Yeah. They were really, really good gigs. But we toured with Total Fucking Destruction, which was Rich Hoke, the drummer out of Brutal Truth, which were his band. So they came over for a couple of tours, and we did a couple of tours with them. But yeah, at that time, there were a lot of bands popping up in this like UK grind scene. Bands like Narcosis, we were playing with, sometimes on a weekly basis, and Tangaroa from Leeds. And we were all doing different stuff. And it was quite an exciting time, really. Yeah, and they were usually were really good gigs.
Because like Shank and Scalp Lock's probably around the same time, isn't it?
Yeah, we played with Scalp Lock. No, we played with Scalp Lock with Koreisch, I think.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Because that's a band I don't really know too much about. I just remember they had that like, it's like Split 7 with Shank, isn't it, I think?
Right. I only had an EP that they did. I think their first EP. I really liked them. I thought they were great,
Yeah, because they were a London group, weren't they?
Yeah.
I've got a Total Fucking Destruction story.
Right.
About Rich Hoke, yeah. It was like we played, it was like Total Fucking Destruction and Unholy Grave tour. We were like smoking a joint or something outside. And I guess they're like European joints are different to American ones or whatever. Because it was just about done. And I remember like just threw it away. I think we just threw it on the floor, and like Rich Hoke's like, what are you doing, man? That's a joint, man. He's just like picks it up. He's going, look, man, you just fucking smoke it. And they've got like the roach clips and stuff, haven't they? Could like just smoke it down to the filter.
Yeah.
So he's basically like smoking filter. And it was just like, what the fuck, It's not the British way in that of smoking joints.
No. No, that's really weird because I've got a weed story with total fucking destruction as well. We stayed in London, and I went knackered because I'd driven down, so I went to sleep, and I got quite a stash with me, and we used to have a travel bong, and I'll say this
Travel bong
may or may not have been me, but whoever was driving, who may or may not have been me. The passenger used to load this, and it weren't a small bong; it were a proper big glass bong, and he'd load it up and fire it up while I was driving down motorway, and while this person was driving down motorway, and I were absolutely bollocks. So we got to this house, and I got up in the morning. I'm like, oh, let's just start smoking again. And total fucking destruction had smoked all my weed, every bit of it. So that's my story.
bastards, eh?
Yeah.
Like after all this stuff around like the later 2000s, 2008, 2007, whatever, you like create the Frequency 13 recordings label to like put out all the stuff that was happening. And this is the true Sheffield black psychedelia thing, isn't it?
Yep.
Just to like get an idea on that, because it's something I'd expect people don't really know a great deal of. So you're the man.
We were quite serious about it, and especially about that name. But there is a joke in this. Obviously, it comes from true Norwegian black metal. But all we ended up doing with Frequency 13 early on were, these quite psychedelic albums. And I think we weren't doing any proper bands at that time, like full bands. I'd started moving into doing stuff on computer, and so had Dave as well, who did Black Vomit and who I play with in Drawn from Ica now. And we were doing this stuff and helping each other out with vocals or with bits of bass and stuff like that. So we did. So we were doing Black Vomit, and Simon, who I played with in Thekevorkiansolution and bands before, he were doing a project called Dukkha, and I were doing Icebound Majesty. And we decided to start releasing this stuff because I don't think we never searched out anyone to release it. We just kind of thought we'll just do it ourselves because, and this was before Bandcamp, which obviously now we've got a Bandcamp site. But we did get in touch with a few places, and places like Amoeba Records in America and Crucial Blast were taking our stuff. The same people who were involved in this collective were also making music. So you'd got the guy who were playing keyboards in Thekevorkiansolution. He were doing electronic stuff, and another guy who lived in that house. He were doing kind of pseudo classical compositions, which is one of our releases about trees. But he got this program. I can't remember what they call the program. It's like an orchestral program with like real instruments. So yeah, we were doing that, and I'd say Frequency 13 were kind of Dave's baby. And it's always been a bit of either a 60-40 or a 70-30 split in who does what. He always did a lot of legwork, but I did most of the artwork for album covers. Yeah, and we just rolled on that for a while, and we did a couple of gigs as kind of showcases for people involved, which we planned really well, so there were no break in the music. So, we'd have someone be, doing some guitar ambience, and then we'd have someone off stage start playing an acoustic guitar, and then the next band would be setting up while they were playing, and then they'd play, and then something else would happen. And that's what we kind of maybe wanted to create something different within that. And I mean, a lot of it were kind of electronic black metal and doom, but we had so many friends that were involved that weren't into that stuff that, just weren't in. I mean, I'll not say scene because there's never really been a scene in Sheffield, a metal scene. But yeah, we were just involved with all these people who were doing all different types of stuff, and it really worked for a long time.
When did you decide to do the Unholy Warlock?
Oh yeah,
Just to explain stuff about that, because it's, it's
that also
yeah.
were part of the Frequency 13 thing, and it kind of was shifting. Personnel shifted, and at its largest, we were kind of 6 people, 2 of which were people who'd done electronic stuff on the label. When Frequency 13 started, it was a time when I met Jerry, and I think he did have a massive influence in that he introduced me to so much stuff. Like introduced me to Magma and Circle and Turbo Negro and just loads of stuff, And we'd go to gigs together, and we started jamming, and that were the only kind of band we were doing, but it were all improvised, blown out psychedelic rock, recorded on a mini disc with a stereo mic. And then Dave joined on bass, and then we got Jez, who played keyboards in Thekevorkiansolution, playing keyboards, and a guy called Connell, who did the classical stuff on vocal effects, and recorded quite a lot of stuff. We released one album on the main, what's on Bandcamp now. That was a kind of gateway into improvising for me, because we'd always done a bit in other bands, but it were always, someone would come down with a riff, and then we'd work stuff out around that. But that would just get in a room, switch everything on, and start playing. And that was a real eye opener. But I think, Jerry were a massive part of that. And I think there's been a few times in my life where there's been people who have introduced me to different musics. One early on when we were doing Koreisch with a guy who introduced me to Public Image and stuff like that. And the other one's Jerry, playing me all this stuff that I didn't even know existed. So
Plus, I'd imagine there was probably a gigantic bong set up in your practice space, was there?
Possibly, yeah.
Pipe?
Yeah, pipe and joints.
Big pipe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The great thing about that is we'd always then decamp to, the place, the house, what we'd go to, and smoke more and listen back to what we'd done. We were like high making it, and then we were higher listening back to it. And it always sounded like the best thing. It's like, this is the best thing that anyone's ever created in music. People should stop playing music because this is the best thing. And then you'd listen to it again and be like, yeah, I'm not quite sure about this. But yeah, that was a really good time. And I think there's a couple of times that, obviously because Jerry moved back up north, and there's been a couple of times in, say, last 10 years, 5 years, that he's kind of threatened to come down and do it again. But hopefully it'll happen one day.
Well, moving on to like the past 10 years, kind of activities or things that you've been involved with or drummed upon or whatever, because where does it begin, I suppose, for the past 10 years?
I think it probably begins with that we reformed Thekevorkiansolution and did a demo and some gigs. And when that fell apart again, I started searching out other musicians to do some stuff with. And it seems like I've got a little bit of a habit of doing bands that do one album and that's it. So I did a band called Trials, which was a kind of instrumental progressive doom band. We like keyboards and samples. Did that for a couple of years and recorded one album with that, then split up. And the guitarist out of that, we carried on because the bass player, he came down to practice one day. I think he were getting a bit pissed off anyway, but me and the guitarist were kind of working on something new. And he said, that shit, it sounds like thrash. And he more or less packed his bass up and just went. And that were that. It might have been a bit thrashy, but so then after that, we formed a band on the back of that, which was a band called Drought on Titan. And again, we did one album with that, which were kind of, maybe proggy, thrash, voivody, Watchtower weirdness.
All right, yeah.
And then when that fell apart, the bass player out of that band, then that we started doing Out Inc., which is one of my current bands. And throughout all that, me and Dave were doing Drawn from Ica, which started off as a duo thing. Then we made it a full band, which we played a couple of gigs with and did a demo. And then we sacked everyone else because they weren't listening to us because we were quite strict on what we wanted to do, Nice guys, but, we were saying, well, we want to play more like, like Angel Corpse or Asuk or, just dirty and fast. And they were coming down with like second-rate obituary riffs. And it's like, well, I'm not bothered about it. So, we kind of said, you're not in, we're not doing this anymore. And more or less them going, well, we're a good band, it's a shame it's splitting up. And we're like, nah, it's not splitting up, we're sacking you. Sounds a bit harsh, but so
that's a metal move, that really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sacking the band, sacking everyone and starting like with people who are going to do as they're told.
Yeah. So, and we've kept it as that because me and Dave know what we want to do. Even though we kind of change sound on every album, we've only got ourselves to answer to.
And you mentioned Out Inc. Is that like the past sort of 5 years? Is that, well, when was that band formed? Because that's like it's a bit different, isn't it? Because that's your kind of prog, jazz, kind of avant. I don't know, I'd just say, well, yeah, that vibe, isn't it?
That came about because in my real life, I'm a postman. And this new guy started, young guy, and we were working together one day and we were just on his break and talking about music. And obviously I started probably talking about death metal. But he said, oh, I play as well. We started talking about jazz and prog and stuff like that. And we realised we were into quite a lot of similar things. And I said to him, I really want to do something that's not metal. And then I think probably a couple of weeks later, we started jamming, got the old bass player involved from Drought on Titan, John, and with these two Johns. So John, guitarist, who I formed it with, he said, I've got this old mate, because he's from Cleethorpes originally. And he said, I've got this old mate from Cleethorpes who plays saxophone. So we were like, well, saxophone, it's got, we've got to have that. And then we just started writing some jazz rock, I guess, and, John not coming from metal at all. If you're from metal, you can always, maybe you can attempt to do something else, but it's got a little whiff of metal about it. But he had none of that, and it was fantastic. We're coming down with these kind of weird, scrunky, folky, jazzy riffs, and attempting to put drums that weren't metal drums to it. So it was a learning curve for me. Yeah, writing songs, doing a bit of a demo, and then we'd got some songs ready for an EP. And I called on, in fact, I bumped into a guy in town, Brian, who played on the Koreisch album, did some noise on that. And he did some stuff with the trip hop band, or were slightly involved with that. But he used to do, he used to be sound engineer at a pub in Sheffield called The Grapes, which were basically the place where, that broke the Arctic Monkeys. It was a really, really cool live venue, which is obviously long gone as a live venue now, which is a shame. And I said, I've got this band. We want someone to record it. Have you still got your recording gear? And he'd got, reel to reel. And he said, oh, well, send it me. I'll have a listen. So I sent him this stuff and he's like, yeah, I'll record it. Great, So I went down and recorded it, this EP. And he were kind of adding stuff and suggesting stuff. And by the end of that recording session, I'd asked him to join band. So now we're a quintet and we've done 2 albums and another EP as that. So that's that up to date, really.
I guess you also do some sort of like session or kind of fill-in work for bands as well, because like another thing that I wasn't aware of was the Blind Monarch, which is like a doom. It's more of a traditional doom style band, isn't it, that you played in?
Yeah, I've known the singer out of Blind Bonnet for quite a long time, Tom. He was saying he was doing this band, and I bumped into him in a pub, and I said, "Look, and he was struggling to find a drummer, and I said, if you give me a shout, I can help you out, write some songs and stuff like that." And then I ended up going down and just learning some stuff, and then played with Blind Bonnet for probably 5 years, I think, 4 or 5 years, and recorded an album with them, which were interesting because we recorded in a disused post office in Hull with no electric, and we had to pipe the electric in from the church next door. No lighting, no heating.
Yeah.
In November.
Graham.
Yeah,
Good
absolutely.
conditions. Good conditions, perfect.
And it was, a massive room that had been stripped of everything, and playing drums in that room with the acoustics were fantastic. So we did. We did that album, and I did a few pretty good gigs with that, and I ended up. Well, maybe a bit. I were ready to leave, and they were ready to move on, possibly with a new drummer. I think I'd possibly lost a bit of interest with it. That it weren't quite what I wanted, but also Drawn from Ica and Out Inc. were really the things what I were really wanting to do. So we parted ways, and and they're carrying on and doing more stuff. But it was a nice few years doing that stuff. Pretty good.
To round off, is your future intentions, or what keeps you kind of moving towards, like new projects, or like fresh stuff, or like having an interest still in what you're doing? Or what is the crucial kind of thing that keeps you engaged?
I think it's got to be that I'm not very good at doing anything else. I'm always hearing new stuff that's inspiring, and I've always would like to think I'm inspired rather than influenced. Hearing stuff and thinking, whoa, that's a really great way of working. So, I mean, I went to a gig on Wednesday night. We were like a free jazz group, and very open and very improvised, but I had kind of like moments where they kind of came together, and coming away from that thinking that's a really good way of working, then making that kind of inspiration fit into what I do. So in Drawn from Ica, we did stuff that on one of the albums that mimicked I can't remember because I think it was Dave that brought it up, but like a classical piece that has 13 big crescendos. So at the end of one of the songs, it's got 13 big kind of accents. And then, we Out Inc. bring in sections where it's free and then really tightens up into a groove. So that's what keeps me going. I think hearing stuff and getting inspired by other things to push into making new music. I mean, I do some electronic stuff as well, which kind of ticks the box of the ambient stuff that I like. And I think what it is, I mean, me and Dave often talk about it, that we almost now want to make the music that we want to hear. And you could say that you should always do that, but I find myself less and less listening to stuff on record and more listening to what we're doing or thinking about what we might do. And it's not to like be waving my arms around saying, everyone listen to this, because no one really does listen to it. But to know we can produce a work that we can listen back to and go, yeah, that's what we wanted. That's what we intended. We've got Drawn from Ica recorded a 50-minute organ and drum piece that's all worked out. It's not improvised, that we've yet to mix and release. And that just came out of nowhere. But it's what we wanted to hear at time. We wanted a more, I don't know, bombastic kind of droning work to listen to sit alongside an album like A Chalice of Absolute Nothing, which is a short blast, a improvised grindcore, really. So yeah, all the different elements that I can put into stuff. That's what keeps me going, I think. I mean, there's other stuff, like, stuff what I read, and, lyrically, I write all lyrics for Drawn from Ica. So lyrically, there's always inspiration. But I think overall, it's like I say, it's something I can do fairly well, and I can never think of not doing it.